The influence of academia on the mural movement is really something to be reconciled as yet, because muralism as a whole within the United States has suffered a kind of second-class citizenship. And yet what we're looking at is a very finite period of time and a very finite specific geography. You look at the history of muralism, it goes back perhaps to the first marks ever made by mankind on the walls of their caves. We're talking about an art form that has existed the entire time that we have been in human existence. And during the Renaissance, it reached its height when people took places like Leonardo da Vinci took the agency to create a giant piece, a beautiful piece that became iconic and in The Last Supper, or Michelangelo painted the Sistine ceiling, or Giotto painted these amazing frescoes. We're looking at the whole of history in which muralism has been a central activity of making the relationship between architecture and the people and the production of imagery. But in this last period of time, the period of time in which I have lived as a muralist, it has been so well associated. We worked so hard at creating a connection between the work and ethnic people that the murals themselves suffered a kind of racist attitude, that they were effectively the cultural production of those people from the south, meaning the Mayans and the pre-Hispanics who painted on pyramids, and the Talquilos who recorded the history of the Mexica people, to the streets of Los Angeles and to the ghettos of Chicago with African Americans, and the works of John Walker, Bill Walker, who created the first Wall of Respect, which incidentally is going to be in its 50th anniversary in the next couple of years, and which set off a movement. So what's interesting about academia and my relationship to it and my interest in it is the undoing of this idea. And it's basically about ignorance. It's about ignorance of the mural movement and mural knowledge and its importance in art history as a whole. The understanding of muralism as a form that needs to advance and grow in the same way that any art form has to grow, or it dies. So if we suspend it in a moment of a civil rights movement in the 1960s and 70s and think of muralism only being about that, then we're missing the opportunities this next generation will have to use the form, transform the form, and make it relevant to the period they're living in. So part of my interest has always been to educate. And in fact, muralism as a whole has been an educational tool. I mean, people painted in the medieval churches to teach the religious philosophy. It was a way of reaching the people who were uneducated, who couldn't read. And it was also the same in Los Angeles, as we used the walls to speak to the people who didn't have access to education. So it's an educative tool, so why not advance that educative tool so that it gets reintegrated with the whole history of art, it gets integrated to its sources, it advances in a way that is basically based in scholarship and intelligence and research. And perhaps because my work has always been about scholarship, it's always been about finding the answers to a question. Like, why are we in this condition at this particular moment in history? Why those people who own this land, who have the rights to these places, who you can even find a land grant that granted us Griffith Park in downtown Los Angeles, why are we in a poverty program? How did that happen? So that was the beginning of a research that made it possible for us to then make the images that told that story.